Look at you, George. You aren't a man anymore. You're just a broken chair taking up space in my house. Do you really think I'm going to spend the rest of my life changing the diapers of a man who can't even stand up? I don't care if our daughter lives or dies on that surgery table. I am done with both of you." Serena Ford's voice was like ice. She stood in the hospital room, looking down at me with pure disgust. She didn't look at our 10-year-old daughter, Maya, who was asleep on the bed, waiting for a life-saving heart surgery. Serena was already wearing her travel coat, her suitcase packed and sitting by the door. "Serena, please," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Doctor said Maya needs us today. If she wakes up and you aren't here, it will break her heart. Please, don't hurt me like this. I'm stuck in this wheelchair. I can't even go get her a glass of water. I'm helpless. Please, don't leave us alone now." I reached out and grabbed her hand, my fingers trembling. I looked like a weak, defeated man. I had to play this part. Serena didn't know that 10 years ago, I was a billionaire tech genius in the big city. I had moved to this small town to live a quiet life, hiding my wealth to see if I could find a woman who loved me for who I was, not for my money. I finally had my answer, and it was a nightmare. "Get your hands off me, George," Serena snapped. She pushed my hand away like I was something disgusting. She reached into her bag and slammed a thick envelope onto my lap. "Those are divorce papers. I've already signed them. And since you're a useless, disabled man with no job, I'm selling the family land to your brother Mark. He's a real man. He knows how to take care of me." "That land belongs to Maya," I said, tears filling my eyes. "It's her future." "Not anymore," Serena laughed. "Mark found a way to take it. He's waiting for me in the parking lot. We're going to the city to start our new life with the money from the land sale. Have a nice life, George. I hope the hospital has a good trash can for you. And that kid." She turned around and walked out of the room without looking back once. The sound of her high heels clicking on the floor felt like nails being driven into my heart. Can you believe a mother would abandon her sick child and her disabled husband like this? If you want to see George get his revenge and show her who he really is, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Comment justice if you think Serena is going to regret this day forever. As soon as the elevator doors closed and Serena was gone, the door to Maya's room opened again. A man in a blue janitor's uniform walked in. He wasn't carrying a mop. He locked the door and pulled a high-tech device from his pocket to block any hidden microphones. "Sir," the man said, standing tall and straight. This was Arthur, my head of security. He had been with me since my days as a billionaire. I didn't look weak anymore. I sat up straight in my chair, and my eyes became cold and hard. "Did you record everything, Arthur?" "Every word, Mr. Ford," Arthur replied. "We have her on video admitting she is abandoning Maya. We also have proof that she and your brother Mark are trying to steal the land. Mark is at a car dealership right now, trying to buy a luxury sports car with money he hasn't even stolen yet." I felt a wave of cold anger. My own brother was helping my wife destroy my life while my daughter was in surgery. "Good," I said. "Let them feel like they've won. Let them spend every penny they think they have. Arthur, it's time to stop pretending. I'm done being the poor disabled guy in this town. What are your orders, sir?" "Call the hospital board," I commanded. "Tell them that I am the secret owner of this hospital. I want the best heart surgeon in the country in this room in 5 minutes. If Maya has even one tiny problem during surgery, I will fire everyone in this building. And what about Serena and Mark?" "Mark thinks he is selling the family land to a big developer, right?" I asked. "Yes, sir. A company called GM Holdings. That's my company," I said, a dark smile appearing on my face. "I am buying my own land back from him. But tell the lawyers to put a trap clause in the contract. If Mark is caught committing a crime, he loses the land and has to pay me back double. He's about to sign his own death warrant." I looked at my legs. Under my jeans, I was wearing secret high-tech robotic braces that I had spent millions to develop. They were hidden, but they were powerful. "They think I can't walk, Arthur. They think I'm a broken chair. Well, today the chair is going to stand up. I want the technicians to meet me in the basement. I'm going to calibrate these braces. When Serena sees me again, I won't be sitting down." "Understood, sir," Arthur said. "By the way, the bank called. Serena just tried to buy a $5,000 watch using your joint credit card." "Did it work?" I asked. "No, sir. I had the bank block it for suspicious activity. She's currently screaming at the store clerk." "Good," I said, looking at my daughter's sleeping face. "That's just the beginning. By tonight, Serena and Mark won't have enough money to buy a cup of coffee. It's time they learned what happens when you mess with a Ford." The hospital basement was cold and smelled of grease and high-voltage electricity. 2 men in white lab coats stood waiting near a heavy steel table. On the table sat the Icarus 7 unit, a sleek carbon fiber exoskeleton designed by my own engineering firm. It was the most advanced mobility tech on the planet, and I was the only human being currently using it. "Mr. Ford, we need to be careful," Dr. Vogel warned as Arthur wheeled me into the light. "The neural link is still sensitive. If we push the calibration too fast, it could cause a seizure." "Push it," I said, my voice as hard as the steel around us. "My daughter is on a surgical table 3 floors up. My wife is currently celebrating my death at a luxury hotel. I don't have time for a slow recovery. I need to be able to stand, Vogel. I need to be able to walk into that town hall tonight and look my brother in the eye." Arthur helped me onto the table. I watched as they strapped the cold, lightweight braces to my thighs and calves. These weren't bulky machines, they were slim enough to fit under my regular trousers, powered by a battery pack that looked like a standard back brace. As Vogel synced the computer to the chip implanted at the base of my spine, I felt a sharp electric sting. It was a jolt of pure fire traveling down my nerves. For the first time in 3 years, I felt my toes, then my ankles, then the weight of my own muscles. "Calibration starting," Vogel whispered. 3, 2, 1. I gritted my teeth, a guttural groan escaping my throat. It felt like my legs were being rebuilt by 1,000 tiny hammers. But then, the pain faded into a strange, buzzing strength. "Stand up, George," Arthur said, his voice full of hope. I grabbed the edge of the table. My heart was pounding. I put my feet on the floor. I didn't feel the floor with my skin, but I felt the pressure data being fed directly into my brain. I pushed. For the first time since the fire at the nursery, I stood up. I stood at my full height of 6'2". I looked down at Arthur and Vogel. I wasn't the broken chair anymore. I was a giant. "The motor response is 98%, Vogel said, checking his tablet. "It's a miracle." "It's not a miracle," I said, taking a shaky mechanical step forward. "It's a weapon. Now, Arthur, give me the update on GM Holdings." "Yes, sir," Arthur said, handing me a secure phone. "Your brother, Mark, just arrived at the law firm of Miller & Associates. He has the forged deed to the Ford Timberland. He thinks he's meeting with a representative from GM Holdings to sign the final sale for $12 million. Is the representative ready?" I asked. "Our lawyer Sarah is playing the part. She has the check ready, a check that is legally valid but tied to a conditional escrow account. Once Mark signs the deed over to GM Holdings, he is legally bound to the fraud and felony clause we discussed." "Good," I said, taking another step. Each movement was becoming more natural, the software in the braces learning my gait. "Mark thinks he's selling the land to a faceless corporation. He doesn't realize that GM stands for George and Maya. I am literally buying my own birthright back from his thieving hands." While I was learning to walk again in the dark of the basement, Serena Ford was living her best life. Or so she thought. She was standing in the middle of the Gilded Rose, the most expensive boutique in the city. She had a mountain of designer bags on the counter, silk dresses, leather boots, and a diamond watch that cost more than a year of my disability payments. "That will be $24,500, Mrs. Ford," the clerk said with a fake, wide smile. Serena tossed my black credit card onto the counter. "Just put it on the account, and have the bag sent to the Ritz-Carlton suite." The clerk swiped the card. Beep. "Declined." Serena's smile faltered. "That's impossible. Try it again. It must be your machine." The clerk swiped again. Beep. "Declined. Call bank." "This is ridiculous," Serena hissed, her face turning a bright, angry red. "Do you have any idea who I am? My husband has a massive settlement coming. This card has a $50,000 limit." "I'm sorry, ma'am," the clerk said, her smile disappearing. "The system says account suspended for security review. I can't accept this." Serena pulled out her phone and dialed the bank's very important person line, the one she thought was hers. "Yes, this is Serena Ford. Why is my card declined? I'm at a store right now and it's extremely embarrassing." "Hello, Mrs. Ford," a calm professional voice answered. It wasn't a bank teller. It was one of my AI-integrated security operators. "We noticed a series of unusual transactions. Since Mr. George Ford is currently in a life-saving medical facility and has been flagged as vulnerable, all joint assets have been moved to a protective trust for his daughter, Maya Ford." "What?" Serena screamed, drawing the attention of everyone in the boutique. "I am his wife. I have power of attorney." "Actually, ma'am," the voice continued, "our records show that a divorce filing was initiated this morning from your IP address. As per the conflict of interest clause in the North Star financial agreements, your access to the primary funds has been terminated. You currently have a balance of $42.16. Serena felt the air leave her lungs. $42? "That's impossible. George is a nobody. He's a broke fireman." "We suggest you contact your legal counsel, Mrs. Ford. Good day." The line went dead. Serena looked at the pile of bags on the counter. The clerk was already starting to put the dresses back on the hangers. "Is there another way you'd like to pay, ma'am?" the clerk asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Serena grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with rage. She marched out of the store, her mind racing. "It's okay," she told herself. "Mark is signing the land deal. $12 million. I don't need George's pathetic credit card. Mark will have the check by tonight." She pulled out her phone and called Mark. "Mark, where are you? The cards are blocked. George did something to the accounts." "Relax, Serena." Mark's voice came through, sounding smug and oily. "I'm at the lawyer's office right now. The lady from GM Holdings is sitting right in front of me. She's got a check for $12 million on the table. Once I sign this, George can rot in that wheelchair for all I care. We'll be set for life. Hurry up and sign it," Serena yelled. "I'm at the mall and I look like a fool." "I'm signing right now," Mark said. "See you at the hotel, baby. We're rich." I watched the entire conversation on my tablet in the hospital basement. I was standing perfectly still now, the braces holding my weight with ease. On the screen, I saw my brother pick up a pen and scrawl his name on the deed. He had no idea that the lawyer sitting across from him was actually my head of legal, and the GM Holdings contract he just signed contained a clause that would strip him of every asset he owned the moment his fraud was proven in court. "He signed it, Arthur," I said, my voice cold. "Yes, sir. The land is officially back in your name, and Mark has officially committed a Class A felony by selling property he doesn't legally own." "Good," I said, looking at the clock. "Maya's surgery should be ending soon. Let's get upstairs. I want to be the first thing she sees when she opens her eyes, and I want to be the last thing Serena sees before the handcuffs go on." I turned toward the elevator, walking with a slow, deliberate pace. Each step felt like a drumbeat of war. The Ford legacy wasn't just about land or money. It was about justice, and justice was finally coming home. Batch 3 of the Ford legacy, the elevator ride up from the basement, was the longest 30 seconds of my life. I stood tall, my back pressed against the cold metal wall, feeling the subtle vibration of the Icarus braces as they stabilized my center of gravity. I wasn't just standing, I was vibrating with a controlled, predatory energy. When the doors opened on the surgical floor, the nurses' station went silent. They had seen George Ford for 3 years, the quiet man in the squeaky chair who always had a kind word despite his tragedy. Now they saw a ghost made of steel and fury. I walked toward Maya's recovery room. Each step was a testament to millions of dollars in research and 3 years of secret, agonizing sweat. I reached the door just as Dr. Miller was stepping out, pulling his surgical mask down. He looked exhausted, but when his eyes traveled from my face down to my feet, his jaw practically hit the floor. He knew my medical charts better than anyone. He knew I was clinically paralyzed. "George?" he stammered, his eyes wide. "Ow, what is this?" "The surgery, doctor," I said, my voice steady and commanding. "How is my daughter?" Miller blinked, shaking off the shock. "She's a fighter, George. The valve replacement was perfect. She's in recovery now. She's waking up. But..." "George, you're walking. If the board finds out we've been treating a man who..." "The board won't find out anything they aren't supposed to know," I interrupted, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Because I am the board, David. Now let me see my daughter." I entered the room. The lights were dimmed, and the only sound was the steady, healthy rhythm of the heart monitor. Maya looked so small amidst the wires and tubes, but her color was returning. I sat in the chair beside her bed, not because I had to, but because I wanted to be at her level when she opened her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I'm here, Maya," I said, taking her hand. "I'm right here. You did it. You're all fixed up." "Where's Mommy?" she asked, her eyes searching the room. I felt a pang of anger so sharp it nearly tripped the sensors in my leg braces. "Mommy had to go away for a little while, sweetheart. But don't you worry. From now on it's just you and me, and I promise you nobody is ever going to take anything from us again." While I sat there holding my daughter's hand, my security feed on my phone buzzed. It was a silent alert from the Ford family home, the modest ranch house on the edge of the timberland. Serena was there. She hadn't gone to the city yet. She had realized the credit cards were dead, and she had come back for the only other thing she thought had value, my hidden emergency cash in the family heirlooms. On the screen, I watched her kick the front door open. She was frantic, her hair disheveled, her expensive coat stained with sweat. She ran straight to the floorboard in the master bedroom where I kept a small fireproof safe. She used a crowbar, screaming in frustration as she pried it open. She expected to find the $50,000 in cash I told her was our emergency fund. Instead, the safe was empty, except for a single laminated photograph. It was a picture of the day we met, back when I thought she was a waitress with a heart of gold, and she thought I was just a handsome guy with a good job. On the back of the photo, I had written in bold black ink, "The Deadeye Stew, Serena," she screamed, throwing the photo across the room. She started smashing things, my trophies from the fire department, the hand-carved wooden toys I'd made for Maya. She was a whirlwind of petty destruction. She didn't realize that every move she made was being recorded in 4K resolution, being fed directly to a police server I had already prearranged. "Mark!" she shrieked into her phone as she ran back to her car. "The house is empty. He knew. George knew. Did you get the check? Tell me you have the check." "I have it, Serena." Mark's voice was shaky on the speakerphone. $12 million. But the lawyer said it's a certified escrow check. I can't cash it at a regular bank. I have to go to the main branch of North Star Bank downtown. They have to verify the deed first. "Then get there now," Serena yelled, peeling out of the driveway, gravel spraying against the siding of the house I had built with my own 2 hands. "If we don't get that money in the next hour, George is going to have us arrested. I know he's doing something. He's not the man we thought he was." They were half right. I wasn't the man they thought I was. I was the man who had designed the very banking system they were currently rushing toward. I looked back at Maya. She had fallen back into a deep, healing sleep. I stood up, the servos in my knees whirring softly. I adjusted my jacket and looked at Arthur, who was standing by the door. "The main branch, Arthur," I said. "I want to be in the manager's office when they arrive. I want to see Mark's face when he tries to cash a check signed by a man he thinks is a cripple." "The police are in position, sir," Arthur replied. "And I've just received word from our forensics team. They found the accelerant, samples from the nursery fire 3 years ago. We've finally tracked the purchase of the chemical. It wasn't an accident, George." I froze. My entire life, the pain, the wheelchair, the loss of my career, had been based on the tragedy of that fire. "Who bought it, Arthur?" Arthur hesitated, looking at his tablet. "The credit card used for the purchase. It belonged to your brother, Mark. And the GPS data from Serena's phone at the time? She was parked 3 blocks away, waiting for him." The world turned red. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just a divorce. They had tried to kill me 3 years ago. They had turned me into a hero so they could live off my disability and eventually steal my land. "Change of plans," I said, my voice vibrating with a terrifying low frequency. "Don't just have them arrested for fraud. I want the attempted murder charges ready. And Arthur, tell the bank manager to let them into the vault. I want them to feel like they've finally made it. I want them to be surrounded by all the gold in the world right before the walls close in." I walked out of the hospital room, my stride long and confident. I wasn't George Ford, the victim, anymore. I was the ghost of a man they tried to burn, and I was bringing the fire back to them. The North Star Bank downtown was a fortress of marble and bronze. It was the kind of place where the silence felt expensive. Mark and Serena burst through the revolving doors looking like 2 people who had just survived a shipwreck and found a chest of gold. Mark was clutching the GM Holdings check so tight the edges were crinkling, his eyes darting around the lobby with a mixture of triumph and pure twitchy paranoia. "May I help you?" the concierge asked, his voice smooth and unimpressed. "We're here to see the manager," Mark barked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I have a certified escrow check from GM Holdings. $12 million. We need it cleared and moved to a private offshore account immediately." The concierge glanced at the check, then at a small monitor behind his desk. A red light flickered on his screen, a signal I had set from my tablet at the hospital. "Of course, Mr. Ford. Manager Higgins is expecting you. He's requested that this transaction be handled in the secure vault downstairs for your privacy." Serena squeezed Mark's arm, a manic grin stretching across her face. "You hear that? Privacy. They know we're big players now, Mark. No more small-town garbage." They followed the concierge to the heavy elevator. They didn't notice that the security guards in the lobby weren't bank employees. They were my private tactical team. They didn't notice that the elevator didn't just go down. It required a biometric scan that the concierge performed with a gloved hand. When the doors opened, they were standing in the heart of the vault. It was a massive room filled with rows of safety deposit boxes and cages of gold bars. In the center was a polished, mahogany table. Sitting there was a man in a sharp suit, Higgins, and a laptop. "Welcome," Higgins said, standing up. "Please, sit. I've been informed this is a significant settlement." "It's the Ford Timberland," Mark said, slamming the check onto the table. $12 million. Verify it so we can get out of here." Higgins picked up the check, scanning it into his system. "The funds are valid. However, as per the GM Holdings contract you signed 2 hours ago, there is a mandatory verification of identity and intent clause. We just need to review the security footage associated with the property's history to ensure no third-party claims exist." "What footage?" Serena asked, her voice dropping an octave. George is a cripple. He hasn't left his bed in weeks. There are no other claims. Oh, it's not the house footage we're looking at, a voice boomed from the back of the vault. The heavy steel door at the far end of the room hissed open. Serena and Mark spun around. Out of the shadows walked a man. He wasn't in a wheelchair. He wasn't leaning on a walker. He was walking with a slow, powerful rhythm, his shoulders broad, his eyes cold enough to freeze, the blood in their veins. "George?" Serena whispered, her face turning a ghostly shade of gray. She clutched the back of her chair, her knees buckling. How are you standing?" "The broken chair is a bit more complicated than you thought, Serena," I said, stopping 5 feet away from them. I stood at my full height, looking down at my brother, who had turned a sickly shade of yellow. "I've been standing for months. I just wanted to see how far you two would go." "George, listen," Mark stammered, his hands shaking as he reached for the check on the table. "I was doing this for us, for Maya. The land was just sitting there. You were doing it for the Ferrari you tried to buy this morning, Mark," I interrupted. "And you were doing it for the woman who spent the last 3 years wishing I would just hurry up and die so she could play billionaire's widow." I turned to the wall and tapped a remote. A massive screen flickered to life. It wasn't the land deed. It was a grainy, high-contrast video from 3 years ago. It showed the back of the Riverside nursery. It showed a man in a dark hoodie pouring a liquid along the baseboards of the wooden structure. The man looked at the camera for a split second before striking a match. It was Mark. Then, the video shifted. It showed a car parked a block away. The interior light was on. A woman was sitting in the driver's seat watching the nursery begin to glow with orange flames. She didn't call 911. She checked her lipstick in the rearview mirror and drove away. "It was Serena. You didn't just want the land," I said, my voice vibrating with a quiet, lethal rage. "You tried to burn me alive. You knew I'd run into that building because there were kids inside. You banked on my heroism to be my funeral. That video. That's a fake," Serena screamed, her voice cracking. "You're a tech freak, George. You made that up to frame us." "I didn't have to make it up," I said. "I bought the server that the original footage was stored on. The local police thought it was lost in a glitch. They didn't realize I owned the company that provided their cloud storage. I've had this for 3 years. I was waiting for Maya to be healthy enough so that when I sent you both to hell, she wouldn't have to feel the heat." Mark lunged for the vault door, but it slammed shut with a heavy hydraulic thud. "The check, Mark," I said, pointing to the $12 million piece of paper. "Read the fine print at the bottom, the one under the GM Holdings logo." Mark looked down, his eyes scanning the tiny text. His face went pale. "In the event of a criminal investigation involving the seller, the buyer reserves the right to freeze all personal assets of the seller as collateral." "You didn't just sell me the land, Mark," I smiled. "You gave me permission to liquidate everything you own. Your house, your car, your bank accounts, even that silk scarf Serena is wearing. It all belongs to GM Holdings now, and GM Holdings is me." The sound of sirens began to echo through the bank's ventilation system. The concierge and the guards stepped into the vault, pulling out heavy-duty zip ties and badges. "George, please." Serena fell to her knees, sobbing, reaching for my legs, the cold carbon fiber legs she thought were a weakness. I was scared. Mark talked me into it. "I love you, George. We can start over." I stepped back, her hands sliding off the high-tech fabric of my trousers. "You told me this morning that you didn't care if Maya lived or died on that table. Those were the last words you'll ever say to me, Serena." I turned to the lead detective. "They're all yours. I want the arson charges, the attempted murder, and the multi-million-dollar fraud. Don't go easy on them. I'm the one paying for the prison's new roof next year. I want to make sure their cell is particularly sturdy." I walked out of the vault without looking back. As the heavy doors closed on their screaming, I felt the last of the broken man leave my soul. I had a daughter to get back to, a forest to protect, and a life that was finally truly my own. The air at the Ford Timberland was different. It smelled of ancient pine and the deep, damp earth that had supported my family for 4 generations. After the chaos of the bank vault and the screaming sirens of the city, the silence here should have been a comfort. But as Arthur drove the black SUV up the winding gravel path toward the main cabin, I felt a familiar prickle at the back of my neck. "Sir, the sensors at the north perimeter were tripped 10 minutes ago," Arthur said, his eyes scanning the tree line. "It could be a deer, but the heat signature was too concentrated. Someone is out there. They're moving fast if they think they can claim a stake now," I said, adjusting the tension on my leg braces. I stepped out of the car, my boots crunching on the gravel. I didn't need the wheelchair, but I still carried a heavy cane, mostly to hide the whirring of the servos in my knees. We reached the cabin porch, and I saw a man sitting in my father's old rocking chair. He wasn't Mark, and he certainly wasn't a local. He was wearing a gray tailored suit that cost more than a mid-size sedan, and he was sipping from a flask with a bored expression on his face. "George Ford," the man said, not standing up. "I must say, the miracle recovery story is going to play very well in the tabloids. Disabled hero walks again to arrest thieving wife. It's poetic." "Who are you?" I asked, standing at the base of the steps. Arthur moved to my left, his hand hovering near his concealed holster. "My name is Victor Vane. I represent the actual board of directors behind the shell company Mark was trying to deal with before you intercepted him with your little GM Holdings stunt." He stood up then, and I realized he wasn't just a lawyer. He had the eyes of a man who looked at people like they were line items on a spreadsheet. "Your brother took a very large bridge loan from us 6 months ago, George. He used this land as collateral. Forged signatures or not, the money was spent. Our money. My brother is currently in a holding cell for arson and attempted murder," I said. "Whatever debt he ran up is his problem. The land is mine. The courts will have the deed restored by Monday." Victor smiled, a slow, thin line that didn't reach his eyes. "The law is a slow beast, George, but debt is fast. Mark didn't just borrow money, he sold us the development rights. Rights that allow us to clear-cut this entire forest and turn it into a high-density industrial park. We've already moved the heavy machinery to the edge of the property." I felt a surge of heat in my chest. This forest wasn't just wood and leaves, it was the lungs of this town. It was where I had taught Maya to birdwatch. It was the legacy I had promised to protect. "You aren't touching a single tree, Vane," I said, my voice dropping to that dangerous low frequency. "The $12 million you paid into that escrow account at the bank, it's frozen because of the criminal investigation," Victor continued, ignoring my threat. "But my clients, they want their ROI. Either you pay us the 20 million Mark owes in interest and penalties, or we start the saws at dawn. And since you've spent so much money on your secret Icarus legs and your daughter's surgery, I highly doubt you have 20 million in liquid cash lying around in a small-town account." He thought I was just a retired fireman with a clever tech suit. He didn't know about the North Star accounts. He didn't know about the Silicon Valley royalties that hit my private ledger every hour. 20 million? I asked, a dry chuckle escaping my lips. "Is that all?" Victor's brow furrowed. "Don't play the big man with me, George. You're a local hero in a dying town. You don't have that kind of capital." I looked at Arthur. "Arthur, how long would it take to acquire the parent company of Vane's firm? What was it? Apex Industrial?" Arthur checked his tablet. "Apex is a mid-cap firm, sir. Their stock has been shaky since the news of the bank fraud broke this morning. If we initiate a hostile takeover now, about 45 minutes to gain a controlling interest." Victor laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Takeover? You're delusional. You're sitting on a porch in the woods talking about buying a billion-dollar conglomerate. I moved here to be a father, Victor," I said, stepping up the first stair. My leg braces hissed, providing the torque I needed to tower over him. "I moved here because I was tired of destroying men like you. But if you threaten my daughter's forest, I will remember exactly how to do it." I pulled out my own phone, the gold encrypted one. I pressed a single button. "This is G.H. Ford. Execute Scorched Earth on Apex Industrial. I want every short sell triggered by noon. Buy the debt, then fire the board, starting with a man named Victor Vane." The color drained from Victor's face as his own phone began to vibrate violently in his pocket. 1 alert, 2, 10. The sound of 1,000 digital notifications screaming at once. "What did you do?" he whispered, his hands shaking as he looked at his screen. "Our stock, it's cratering. Who are you?" "I'm the man my brother tried to burn," I said. "And you're the man who just tried to extort a ghost. Arthur, get this trash off my porch. If he's still on the property in 5 minutes, have the sheriff add trespassing to the list of his company's legal troubles." Victor scrambled down the stairs, tripping over his own expensive shoes. He ran for his car, the engine roaring as he fled down the gravel path. I stood on the porch, looking out at the trees. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the timberland. I was standing on my own feet, in my own home. But the war wasn't over. Serena and Mark were in jail, but men like Van were the real monsters. They were the ones who armed people like Mark with the greed they needed to turn on their own blood. "Sir," Arthur said, standing beside me, "the takeover is 60% complete. You now officially own the saws that were supposed to cut down these trees." "Good," I said. "Sell them for scrap. Every penny goes to the Riverside Children's Hospital." I looked toward the hospital in the distance, where Maya was sleeping safely. I had spent so much of my life building things, buildings, companies, systems. But as I stood there in the quiet of the woods, I realized the most important thing I had ever built was the wall between my daughter and the people who wanted to hurt her. And that wall was made of iron. "Tomorrow, we bring Maya home," I said. And then, Arthur, we're going to find out exactly how many other people Mark sold pieces of my life to. I want to clear the slate. All of it. The county jail was a grim fortress of concrete and disappointment. I walked through the metal detector, the Icarus braces under my slacks barely making a sound, though the guards looked at me with a mix of awe and suspicion. Word had traveled fast. The wheelchair hero had walked into the bank and taken down the two people who tried to destroy him. I sat behind the thick plexiglass in the visiting room. A moment later, the door on the other side opened. Serena was let in. The silk scarf was gone. Her designer coat had been replaced by a rough orange jumpsuit that washed the color from her face. She looked small, haggard, and for the first time, old. She picked up the phone, her hand trembling. "George," she whispered, "I knew you'd come. You always had a soft heart. You're going to help me, aren't you? Tell the DA it was all a misunderstanding. Tell them Mark forced me." "I didn't come here to save you, Serena," I said, my voice as flat as a tombstone. "I came to tell you that the divorce is final. I used a morality clause in our prenuptial agreement. You're leaving this marriage with nothing but the clothes the state gave you. Even the jewelry you're wearing in your mugshot has been reclaimed as stolen property." Serena's face twisted into a mask of spite. "You think you've won? You think walking around on your robot legs makes you a god? You're still just a lonely, broken man, George. And now you're a single father to a kid who's going to grow up knowing her mother is in a cage because of you. She's in a cage because you tried to kill her father for a timberland you didn't even understand," I replied. "But there's one thing I don't get. Mark didn't have the brains to find those legal loopholes on his own. And Victor Vane? He was a shark, but he was a late arrival. Who gave Mark the idea to burn the nursery 3 years ago?" Serena leaned in close to the glass, a sick yellow smile spreading across her lips. "You really think you were the only one with secrets? You think you moved to this town and just happened to meet a girl like me? George, you're a billionaire. You're a target. We didn't just find those loopholes. Someone sent them to us. My blood ran cold. Who's Serena?" "His name is Julian Vane. Victor's older brother," she hissed. "He's been watching you since you left Seattle. He's the one who coached Mark. He's the one who told me which medications to give you to keep you foggy while we forged your name. And George, he's not after your land. He never was. Then what does he want?" Serena's eyes darted to the guard behind her, then back to me. "The Icarus tech. He knows you didn't just build it for yourself. He knows you have the patents for a Neuralink that could revolutionize the military-industrial complex. Mark was just the distraction. While you were playing hero at the bank, Julian was already moving on your real vault." I stood up so fast the chair screeched against the floor. My real vault wasn't at the bank. It wasn't at the Timberland. My real vault was the private research lab hidden in the sub-basement of the hospital where Maya was currently recovering. "If anything happens to my daughter, Serena," I said, my voice a low, terrifying growl that made the guard step forward. "Oh, he doesn't want to hurt Maya." Serena laughed, a jagged, broken sound. "He wants to use her. He knows the only way to get the final encryption key for the Icarus software is through your biometric signature. Or hers. After all, she's your blood. Your DNA is the key." I slammed the phone onto the hook and turned to the exit. "George," Serena screamed, banging her fists against the glass. "Ask the doctor about the vitamin injection they gave her this morning. Ask them who signed the authorization." I didn't wait to hear another word. I burst through the doors of the jail, my legs pumping with mechanical precision. I was running faster than a human should be able to, the servos in the Icarus braces whining under the strain of 100% power output. "Arthur, get the car," I roared into my headset as I reached the curb. "We have a security breach at the hospital. Code black." "Sir, I'm already seeing it." Arthur's voice came back, tight with panic. "The hospital's internal server just went dark. All elevators are locked down and the surgical wing has been placed on biohazard isolation. We can't get in. Julian Vane." I spat the name like a curse. He used the chaos of the bank arrest to slip into the hospital. He's in there with Maya right now. "Sir, the police are tied up with the transport of Mark and Serena. It'll take them 20 minutes to divert." "I don't have 20 minutes, I said, leaping into the passenger seat of the SUV as Arthur peeled away from the curb. "I've spent 3 years pretending to be a victim. I've spent 3 years letting people think I was weak. Julian Vane is about to find out why they used to call me the Steel King." I pulled a heavy metallic case from under the seat. Inside was the overload module for the Icarus suit. It was a dangerous piece of tech. It would bypass all safety limiters on my nerves, giving me superhuman strength and speed, but it carried a 50% risk of permanent spinal burnout. "George, don't," Arthur said, glancing at the module. "The suit isn't rated for that. It'll kill you." "He has my daughter, Arthur," I said, snapping the module into the base of my spine. If I have to burn my own body to the ground to save her, I'll be the one holding the match this time. I felt a surge of white-hot agony as the modules synchronized. My vision blurred, then sharpened into a digital overlay of thermal heat signatures and structural schematics of the hospital. I could feel every bolt in the building. I could feel the heartbeat of every person inside. And I could feel Maya. Her heart rate was elevated. She was scared. "Drive faster," I commanded. As we screamed toward the hospital, I saw the blacked-out vans of a private security team surrounding the entrance. They weren't there to protect patients. They were a mercenary army. Julian Vane wasn't just a corporate thief, he was a warlord in a three-piece suit. I stood up in the moving car, gripping the roof rack. "Don't stop at the door, Arthur. Drive through the lobby. I'm going straight to the top." "Hold on, sir," Arthur yelled, floorboards hitting the gas. The SUV smashed through the glass doors of the Riverside Hospital lobby, sending security guards diving for cover. I didn't wait for the car to stop. I leaped from the roof, my reinforced legs shattering the marble tiles as I landed. I looked at the closed elevator doors. I didn't press the button. I jammed my fingers into the seam of the heavy steel doors and ripped them open with a screech of tearing metal. I looked up the empty shaft. "I'm coming for you, Julian," I whispered. With a single massive surge of power, I leaped into the darkness of the shaft, grabbing the cables and hauling myself upward, floor by floor, a man-made machine driven by a father's rage. The elevator shaft was a vertical tunnel of shadows and grease. I hauled myself upward, the Icarus braces screaming as the overload module forced my muscles to exert 4 times their natural limit. My fingers, reinforced by the suit's carbon fiber gloves, dug into the steel guide rails like they were made of soft clay. Every time I pulled, I felt a jolt of electricity at the base of my skull. My vision was swimming in a sea of red data: battery 72%, neural load critical, structural integrity compromised. I reached the 12th floor, the restricted surgical wing. With a roar of effort, I kicked the elevator doors outward. They flew off their tracks, crashing into the hallway and sending a pair of armed mercenaries scrambling. They weren't hospital security. They were professionals, wearing tactical vests and carrying suppressed submachine guns. Before they could level their weapons, I was on them. The suit's speed was terrifying. I didn't punch, I collided. I hit the first man with the force of a moving vehicle, sending him flying 30 feet back through a glass partition. The second man fired a burst into my chest, but the Icarus plating, designed to withstand construction, site collapses, caught the rounds. I grabbed the barrel of his gun, twisted it into a horseshoe with one hand, and tossed him aside like a rag doll. "Julian," I roared, my voice echoing through the sterile white hallway. "Come out and face me." I moved toward the private research lab at the end of the hall. The biohazard light was flashing red. I could see the thermal signatures through the wall. 6 men inside, clustered around the central terminal, and in the middle of them, the small, faint heartbeat of my daughter. I smashed through the reinforced laboratory door. The room was filled with high-end server racks and medical equipment. Julian Vane stood at the main console, a sleek silver tablet in his hand. He was older than Victor, with silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from cold marble. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked annoyed. "George," Julian said, not looking up from the screen, "you really should have stayed in the wheelchair. It suited your hero narrative. Now, you're just an obstacle in the way of progress." Across the room, Maya was strapped into a high-tech medical chair. She was awake, her eyes wide with terror, a thin fiber-optic cable running from the base of her neck to Julian's terminal. "Daddy!" she cried out, her voice breaking. "Don't move, Maya," I said, my voice dropping to a low, lethal hum. I turned my eyes to Julian. "Unhook her. Now, or I will tear this building down with you inside it." "I can't do that, George," Julian said, finally looking at me. "I'm currently downloading the neural mapping sequences from her spinal cord. Your Icarus software is brilliant, but it requires a DNA-matched biological template to unlock the final stage of the combat AI. You were too smart to give me your own, so I'm taking the next best thing. Her cells are identical enough for the handshake. She just had heart surgery. You monster," I snarled, taking a step forward. 2 mercenaries stepped into my path, leveling high-voltage stun batons. "Stay back, Mr. Ford," one warned. "One more step and we trigger a lethal surge through the girl's cable. It'll fry her brain before the door even hits the floor." I froze. My HUD flashed a warning: system overheat, 40% chance of permanent nerve damage. I didn't care about the suit. I cared about the cable attached to my daughter's spine. "What do you want, Julian?" I asked, my hands open and shaking. "You want the company? Take it. You want the patents? I'll sign them. Just let her go." "I don't need your signature anymore," Julian smiled. "The download is at 85%. Once it's finished, your daughter will be redundant. And you'll be the tragic father who suffered a technological malfunction during a daring rescue. He tapped a key on his tablet. The Icarus braces on my legs suddenly locked up. I fell to my knees, the servos grinding as they fought against a remote override signal. Did you really think I wouldn't have a back door into the hardware? Julian asked, walking toward me. I've been studying your designs for years. I know every line of code. I know your overload module is currently cooking your spinal cord. In about 3 minutes, your heart is going to stop, George, and I'm going to watch it happen. He stood over me, looking down with a patronizing smirk. He reached out to pat my head, but he made one mistake. He assumed I was relying on the software to fight. I wasn't. You know the code, Julian, I gasped, the pain behind my eyes becoming blinding. But you don't know the man. I reached deep into my own mind, bypassing the digital interface entirely. I didn't use the servos. I used the sheer raw willpower that had kept me alive in that burning nursery 3 years ago. I felt my muscles tear, the Icarus suit's metal frame groaning as I forced it to move against the lock code. With a scream of pure agony, I shattered the hydraulic locks on my knees. I lunged forward, grabbing Julian by the throat before he could react. The download, I hissed into his ear, is cancelled. I didn't use my hands to stop him. I used my head. I slammed my forehead into his, the reinforced plating of my suit's crown shattering his nose and sending his tablet flying across the room. As it hit the floor, the screen cracked, and the progress bar for the download froze at 89%. The mercenaries moved in, but they were too late. Arthur and my tactical team burst through the windows, rappelling from the roof. The room erupted into gunfire and chaos, but I didn't see any of it. I crawled toward Maya, my legs dragging behind me as the Icarus suit finally died, the black smoke curling from the joints. I reached her chair and ripped the cable from the terminal, not the girl. "I've got you," I whispered, pulling her into my arms. "I've got you, baby." The overload module finally flickered out. The world went black, the last thing I felt being the small, steady beat of Maya's heart against my chest. I had stood up one last time to save her. And as I drifted into unconsciousness, I knew that even if I never walked again, I had finally finished the job. The silence of the hospital room was different this time. It wasn't the heavy, anxious silence of a waiting room. It was the soft, sterile hum of victory. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the ceiling, white, clean, and perfectly still. Then I felt the weight. My legs felt like they were encased in solid lead, a dull, throbbing ache radiating from the base of my spine. "Don't try to move yet, George," a voice said from the corner. I turned my head slowly. Arthur was sitting in a chair by the window, a stack of legal folders on his lap. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "Maya?" I rasped, my throat feeling like it was filled with broken glass. "She's in the next room, sir. She's perfect. The doctors say her heart is stronger than ever. She's been in here every day asking when Superman is going to wake up." Arthur stood up and walked to my bedside, handing me a cup of water. "Julian Vane is in federal custody. We turned over the server, logs from the lab. Arson, attempted murder, corporate espionage, and kidnapping. He isn't getting out, ever." I took a sip of water, the cool liquid bringing me back to reality. "The suit? The Icarus tech?" "Fried," Arthur said simply. The overload module melted the neural link. "The doctors say it's a miracle you aren't a quadriplegic. But, George, the damage to your nerves is significant. You won't be using the tech again for a long time. Maybe never." I looked down at the blanket covering my legs. I had known the price when I flipped that switch. I had traded my mobility for my daughter's life, and I'd make that trade 1,000 times over. "What's in the folders, Arthur? You look like you're ready. For a war." Arthur's face darkened. "While you were out, Serena's lawyers filed a Hail Mary. She's trying to sue for innocent victimhood. She claims Julian Vane and Mark coerced her, and she's filed for emergency temporary custody of Maya. She's arguing that since you are medically unstable and obsessed with dangerous experimental technology, you are an unfit parent." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest, one that didn't need a robotic suit to fuel it. She abandoned her daughter at a hospital. She watched a nursery burn. And she thinks she can use my sacrifice against me? The local judge, Judge Miller, is an old-school guy, George. He sees a billionaire with robot legs and a mother who made a mistake. Serena is playing the repentant woman for the cameras. She's already done 3 interviews with the local news from the county jail, crying about how she was a victim of corporate greed. I sat up, the pain in my back spiking, but I pushed through it. She wants to play the mother card. Fine. Let's show the world who she really is. Arthur, did we get the audio from the car, the one she was in while the nursery burned? We did. But it's not enough for a custody hearing. The judge wants to see stability. He wants to see a home. Then we give him the truth, I said. Call a press conference. Not at the hospital, not at the bank. I want it at the timberland. Right in front of the trees Julian Vane tried to cut down. Sir, you can't even stand, Arthur whispered. I don't need to stand to speak, Arthur. I spent 10 years hiding who I was. I thought the money was the problem. I thought the power was the poison. But I realize now that the power is a tool, and I'm going to use it to bury Serena Ford so deep in legal debt she'll never see the sun again. I reached for the phone on the nightstand and dialed a number I hadn't used in a decade. This is G.H. Ford. I need the best family law team in the country, and tell the Steel King PR team to wake up. I'm coming out of retirement. The day of the hearing was overcast, a gray mist hanging over the town of Riverside. The courthouse was packed. Serena was there, wearing a modest black dress and no makeup, looking like a mourning widow. She had a team of public-funded lawyers who were painting her as a victim of a controlling, tech-obsessed billionaire husband. Your Honor, Serena's lawyer argued, Mr. Ford is a dangerous man. He has secret labs, illegal military-grade technology, and a history of hiding his identity. He's not a father, he's an operative. My client, Serena, was terrified for her life. That's why she left. She was trying to find help. The judge looked at me. I was sitting in my old manual wheelchair. No braces, no secret tech, just me in a plain suit, holding Maya's hand. Mr. Ford, Judge Miller said, the allegations are serious. You've kept your true identity and your medical status a secret from your family in this court. How can I trust the safety of a child to a man who lives in the shadows? I let go of Maya's hand and looked at the judge. I didn't look at the cameras. I looked at the man. I didn't live in the shadows to hide, Your Honor, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. I lived in this town to be a father. I worked at the fire department because I wanted to help people who didn't have millions of dollars to save themselves. When that nursery caught fire, I didn't ask about the tech or the patents. I ran in because there was a child inside. I turned my head and looked directly at Serena. She flinched. Serena says she was scared. She says she left to find help. But while I was in surgery, she was at the Ritz-Carlton. While I was begging her to stay, she was signing a contract to sell the ground Maya walks on. She didn't leave a billionaire, Your Honor. She left a man she thought was broken. And she left a 10-year-old girl who was about to have her heart cut open. I pulled a small digital drive from my pocket and handed it to the bailiff. On that drive is the GPS data from Serena's phone. It doesn't show her going to the police. It shows her at 3 luxury boutiques and a jewelry store within an hour of leaving this hospital. It shows her meeting with Julian Vane to discuss the extraction of our daughter. The room erupted into whispers. Serena's lawyer tried to object, but the judge held up a hand. And as for my stability, I continued. I am the majority owner of North Star Healthcare. I have just signed over the Ford Timberland into a permanent, irrevocable trust for the children of Riverside. I am not a man in the shadows anymore. I am the man who is going to make sure this town never has to rely on predators like Julian Vane ever again. I looked at Maya. She was looking at me with so much pride it hurt more than the surgery. I may never walk again without help, Your Honor, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But I have never stood taller than I am right now. I don't need a suit to be a father. I just need my daughter. The judge stared at the evidence for a long time. He looked at Serena, then at the GPS logs. He looked at the Steel King who was sitting in a rusted wheelchair, refusing to use his power for anything but the truth. The court finds in favor of George Ford, the judge declared, slamming his gavel. Temporary custody is made permanent. Serena Ford, you are to be remanded back to the county jail to await trial for felony child endangerment and conspiracy. Take her away, Serena screamed as the bailiffs grabbed her arms. You can't do this, George, I'm her mother. I didn't say a word. I just turned my chair and wheeled Maya out of the courtroom. As we hit the front steps, the sun finally broke through the clouds. Daddy? Maya asked. Yeah, baby, can we go home now, to the trees? Yes, I said, pulling her onto my lap. Let's go home. Arthur, get the car, I said, standing up with the help of my cane. My legs protested, a sharp spike of pain shooting up my spine, but I ignored it. Sir, it's nearly midnight. The old station is a ruin. Exactly, I said. It's where everything started. I need to know why. The old Riverside fire station was a blackened skeleton on the edge of town, a monument to the night my life changed. We pulled up to the rusted gates, and I made Arthur stay in the car. I needed to do this alone. I walked through the tall weeds, my cane sinking into the soft earth, until I reached the back of the structure where the equipment lockers used to be. The lockers were a twisted mess of charred metal, but Mark was right. One of them, number 412, had been pulled away from the main wall and hidden under a heavy tarp behind the old generator. I knelt down, my breathing heavy, and inserted the key into the rusted lock. The door creaked open. Inside was a small, fireproof box. I opened it and pulled out a stack of documents. They weren't legal papers or land deeds, they were medical records. They were my medical records from the night of the fire, but they were dated 2 days before the fire happened. I turned the page, my hands shaking. There was a report signed by the former chief of the department, a man who had died peacefully in his sleep 6 months after I was paralyzed. The report detailed a massive insurance payout for the department's pension fund, totaling nearly $10 million. The condition for the payout, a line-of-duty disability for a high-profile officer. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The fire hadn't just been about my brother's greed or Serena's desire for a better life. The fire had been a conspiracy by the town's own leadership. They knew I was a hero. They knew that if I was injured, saving a child, the insurance company wouldn't ask questions. And in a town built on lies, the truth is the ultimate weapon. I spent years being a hero for these people, I said, looking back at the ruins of the station. I let them pity me. I let them use me as a symbol of their small-town values. But the Steel King isn't a hero, Arthur. He's a survivor. I turned and walked back toward the car, my cane hitting the ground with a rhythmic, lethal precision. Call the lawyers back, I commanded. I don't just want Serena and Mark in prison. I want the entire town council audited. I want every pension fund frozen. And I want the names of every man who signed these papers published on the front page of every newspaper in the state. And the insurance money, sir? Arthur asked. The $10 million they stole? I'm going to make them pay it back, I said, every cent, plus interest. And then I'm going to buy the town hall. I'm going to tear it down and build a library for the kids in this town. A place where they can learn that being a hero isn't about what you lose. It's about what you refuse to let others take from you. As we drove away from the ruins, I looked at the dark silhouette of the timberland on the horizon. My legacy wasn't just land, it was a reckoning. And by the time I was finished, Riverside would finally know the cost of betrayal. The Riverside Town Hall was packed. It was a historic building, all dark oak and brass, meant to project an image of stability and tradition. But as I sat in the back of the room, my cane resting against my leg, I could see the rot. The men sitting at the high bench, the council, were the same men who had looked me in the eye at Maya's surgery and called me a brother. Councilman Miller, the brother of the surgeon who had saved Maya, cleared his throat. We are here tonight to discuss the future of the Ford timberland. While we are relieved George Ford has recovered, the town's budget is in a state of emergency. We must discuss the industrial zoning. I didn't wait to be called on. I stood up. The sound of my chair sliding back silenced the room. I walked down the center aisle, the mechanical click of my cane echoing like a clock counting down. The budget isn't in an emergency, Miller, I said, my voice cutting through the air. The budget is a crime scene. George, you aren't on the agenda, Miller said, his face flushing a deep, guilty red. Sit down. We all appreciate your service, but you appreciate the $10 million you stole from the insurance company 3 years ago, I said, reaching the front of the room. I pulled a stack of documents from my jacket and slammed them onto the council's bench. I found the records in the fire station. I found the signatures, your signatures. The room went deathly silent. I turned to the crowd, the neighbors, the shopkeepers, the people I'd grown up with. 3 years ago, this council decided that a man's legs were worth $10 million. They hired my brother to set a fire. They told him to put his own son inside to make sure I'd go in. They gambled with the child, life, and my body to save their own skin after they gambled away the town's pension funds on bad investments. That's a lie. One of the other councilmen shouted, his voice cracking. Is it? I pointed to the giant screen on the wall. Arthur, sitting in the back with his laptop, hit a key. The screen filled with the ledger from the secret escrow account. It showed the payments $500,000 to Mark Ford, $200,000 to the former fire chief, and $2 million moved into a private account owned by Councilman Miller's offshore shell company. I didn't move here to be a billionaire, I told the stunned crowd. I moved here to be a neighbor. But since you want to talk about the future of this town, let's talk. As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, I have purchased every single debt bond this town owes. I am the sole creditor of Riverside. I leaned over the bench, looking Miller directly in the eye. You're fired, all of you. The sheriff is waiting in the lobby with warrants for grand larceny, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. And as for the timberland, it's not being zoned for industry. It's been deeded to a permanent trust. It belongs to the children of this town. It can never be sold, and it can never be burned again. As the sheriff and his deputies entered the room to lead the council away in handcuffs, the townspeople stood up. There was no cheering. There was only a heavy, sobering realization of the truth. I walked out of the town hall and down the stone steps. Arthur was waiting with the SUV. "Is it over, sir?" Arthur asked. "The war is over, Arthur," I said, looking up at the stars. "Now the building begins." The morning sun hit the new sign at the edge of the forest, the Maya Ford Wildlife Sanctuary. I stood on the porch of the cabin, watching Maya run through the tall grass with her dog. I didn't need the cane as much today. The doctors said that without the stress of the secret, my nerves were healing faster than anyone expected. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the state prison. Mark had been sentenced to 25 years. Serena had received 15. Julian Vane was facing a life sentence in a federal facility. The justice wasn't just done, it was absolute. I put the phone in my pocket and walked down the steps. I didn't feel like the Steel King or a disabled hero. I felt like a father. I had lost my legs once, and I had almost lost my soul in the pursuit of revenge. But as Maya ran back to me, jumping into my arms and laughing, I realized that the greatest wealth I ever had wasn't in a bank or a lab. It was right here. The Ford legacy wasn't about the money I made. It was about the man I became when I had nothing left. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be.